covers football betting contest countdown show, NFL Week 16. LVC, we're in for a treat this week because right now I'm looking at Pinnacle and there are 8 games currently available for betting. And I think by the time we finish this show, that 8 might become 6 or 5. I don't know how we're going to navigate through this, but we're going to give it our best effort to try pick the top 5 consensus plays. Have you ever seen a week like this before?
Well, you expect the unexpected, right? But this is outrageous. It's making things very difficult.
So let's bring up an important point here for everybody playing the contest, because I reached out and asked you last week. There were rumors that 3 games in week 15 were going to be postponed, and they ended up getting moved, but not ultimately canceled. And I messaged you late in the week. I said, what are we looking at here from the contest? So when it comes to games being canceled, how is the contest handling those entries and what happens to those games?
As long as the games are played by Tuesday night, they count. It doesn't matter where they get moved or what happens to them. But if they are rescheduled or forfeited, then it's a little bit different. A forfeit is going to mean if you picked the team that forfeited, you get 0 points and the other team gets 1 point. If the game just gets relocated to a point past Tuesday or canceled, each player gets a half a point, I believe.
So how is the forfeit determined within the league? Is it on who has more cases? Like, for the example, with Cleveland, Las Vegas, if that game would have not gone as planned, with Cleveland having more issues, they would have been forced to forfeit. Is that right? Because they can't field the active roster of more than 43 guys?
Yeah, is it 43 or 45? But you have to be able to field a certain number of players or else you automatically have to forfeit.
And then what happens if it is a league cancellation? Like if the league cancels the game and it gets played like Wednesday or Thursday. Last year we had like it was Buffalo KC was moved to like a Wednesday or something ridiculous. In that situation, what happens within the contest?
Then it's going to be a half. It's going to be either 0 points for each team or a half a point for each player.
So it'll go down as essentially a push would in the regular contest.
Yeah, I think it's a half a point.
So we've talked all season about how when you're in the contest and you're just trying to gain ground or move up until it gets really late in the season, basically the last week, you just want to stay with making the picks that you normally would and not thinking about the money. But when we have this added element of so many games off the board and so much uncertainty, is there any reason to avoid games with COVID outbreaks, to avoid potentially having the cancellation or the forfeit, or how should strategies be altered?
It's just really interesting how bunched up and how many people are just in this mosh of people. I know included. You are, and a friend of mine is in 21st place, and I was evaluating what his chances were, and I noticed that, basically if you're in 8th place or right around there, you pretty much have no hope to win it. And I believe that people that are in the teens right now, if you took a snapshot of those people, I'll bet you at least one person that's in the top 13 to some 18 or somewhere in that range doesn't even make the money. Somebody's going to fold like a paper napkin out of that group. The difference between 21st place and being out of the money was like only one game. So a lot of things can happen quickly. And for people in this section, to answer your question, as far as COVID games, I certainly want to avoid any game that has the potential of being canceled, because at this point, you cannot afford to not earn points. You can't put yourself in a position to not earn points. And this is going to get us to the point of, well, how many games are lined on even numbers? Now, I haven't had a chance to actually see this week.
Oh, boy. Here's your even number rant.
Are there a lot this week? Oh, boy.
It's piling up. But like you mentioned, so 21st place is 49.5 points. And when you go down, the money break is at 50th. When you go just 1 point beyond 50th to 64th, There's a name in there right in the middle of the screen that's looking pretty good there, representing the brand. The difference between 64th and 21st is a win and a half. So, and that tie for 64th goes a long way down the list, too. It's been incredibly difficult to gain ground, and there's just this chunk that's at mid-high 60s that you're really not getting rewarded for it whatsoever so far to this point.
Yeah, it's difficult. So you do have to apply contest strategy at this point. It depends on whether you're playing to win or you're playing to preserve. And quite frankly, there are so many people involved. There's very few people that should have the strategy of playing to preserve. There's just too many people that you're playing against. So, I mean, if you're at the very, very top, a week like this might be a gift for you if you're just trying to stay in the money and have that attitude, because there are so many, solid numbers and stuff like that. But if I'm trying to win this thing, if I'm trying to move up, I want to avoid those even numbers. I want to avoid the COVID games. I want to avoid any possibility, if possible, where I can lose a half a point on a canceled game or a push. And I know there have not been very many pushes this year, and it hasn't come into play, which means they're due.
So you're going odd numbers only, and you're avoiding the COVID games the rest of the stretch.
Well, that's what I would like to do, but you only have 1, 2, 3, 4,
and
5.
And a handful of those are COVID games too.
Yeah, I mean, this is, well, you got to pick them in the same. I mean, this is non-competitive. It really, hopefully none of these games push and it doesn't make a difference. But you'd like to see these games on half points and allow for more movement. It's unfair to the players that potentially they're going to lose ground by not being able to gain ground, if that makes any sense. I hate the idea of all these even numbers.
You just have them stuck. But I mean, realistically, if we're looking at these numbers, the 49ers, Titans, that game's kind of been between 3 and 3.5 all week. The market is trending towards 2.5. That, in a way, could have been a Thursday night game. It could have enticed more action if that was off of the 3. Then you have the 2 Saturday games. The interesting thing with Indy, Arizona is it's on the other side. It's at Indy -1. The market this morning is Arizona -1. So that's kind of, as we've seen a lot this season, foreshadowing of a move, but at least that's sort of off market. But there's the Packers definitely could have been a half point higher. The Bucks and Panthers, that could have definitely been one way or another off to 10. It's been 10.5 all week. If the injuries to Tampa are as significant as we think, which seems to be the case, that could have been off of the 10 to go 9.5. So I'm with you there that we could have seen a lot more half points on some of these numbers. But to me, as a contest player, what was sort of jarring to me is it's been no question a very good season for me. And I'm not nearly as good of a contest player as you are and never will be. But as someone who's doing this, I'm speaking from a position of privilege in a sense where I'm betting enough that the wins that I have on a weekly basis betting elsewhere are significant enough that I'm not dying in this contest to make the money. But what was interesting to me was over a course of a season, I actually went and looked to just see what's going on, where the money is. 10,000 for top 50. I mean, you're getting 10,000 back on the entry. For the amount of effort and the grind and the stress that this requires to be hitting at such a high percentage, I saw it and I was that's kind of, it doesn't seem to match the effort that's now required within this contest. Because to me, if I'm looking at next year, I would rather have an additional entry potentially in the Survivor than I would another entry in the Million, just because that reward that you get from it just seems so much more substantial for the effort that's put in. Is that a weird thing to say?
Well, what's the 50th? What is 50th place pay? I thought it was 2,000.
No, it's 230,000 total between 16th and 50th divvied up.
Right. So, when you look at when you look at a poker tournament, the poker tournament pays 10% of the people back, basically. And
Right.
obviously we're not getting that. But you've got the interesting quarterly prizes. I think they should probably lower I think they should make the booby prizes like booby prize money-ish, sort of like on the Gong Show. You get $50 for that. I mean, not that low, but I don't think you should be giving significant money away from winners toward any booby prize along the way. I mean, it should be like nominal. And maybe they should expand the pay line to 100 people, keep that $1 million prize for first, and use a percentage scale of paying down the ladder or something based on the number of entries they get.
In your opinion, what's more difficult to win? And so speaking from let's call it like a higher end better, and this is relative to average, but like if you have a couple $1,000s to enter contests and play them over the course of the season, you're probably betting at a minimum a couple $100 a game on a Sunday. And in your opinion, for like the reward you get from the Survivor versus the reward you would get that's equivalent to how much you're making betting if you're hitting 68, 70% over the course of an NFL season and 100 picks, like, which is more difficult, do you think, to have that, like, or sort of exceed that scale? So I'm talking win Survivor versus make more in the contest than you do betting, which is going to require probably high 60s every year from here on out. What's more difficult to do?
Well, you're going to have a lot of luck in both of them. I mean, it's probably a better discussion once these contests are over, quite frankly. But the one thing that I would like to say, that you just have to be lucky in both of these. Number one, if you think the most skilled people are going to win these things every time, that's not going to happen. I mean, there's a few people that are kind of in the mix somewhere around where you are, which is very good, very impressive, that were up there last year. Now, I'm more impressed by those guys than the guy that's got the top 2 picks this year. That's a one-off, as far as I understand. If you can keep on coming back and be in the mix, I think that's more impressive than, the one-hit wonder type thing. Would you rather be AHA or would you rather be somebody else?
Well, it's like the old poker saying where it's sort of proving against luck in some circumstances where the same guys make it deep in the World Series every single year, and then you have the one-off guys that win and you never hear from them again. But
Yeah.
there's definitely truth to that, and I think we're seeing it, like you said, with some of the repeat names at the top. But I think we can agree that at least it provides a ton of great conversation. I think the people watching this show that are still following each week are relating to a lot of the things we're saying when you're playing it, that if you're not in the contest, you don't have that perspective, and it's very interesting to follow. But speaking of contests that are complete, you've got 2 checks behind you. Are you adding a third for your most recent victory this season, and how much can you now finally talk about it?
Well, yeah, I did finally picked up the money for Station's Last Man Standing NFL. I had a partner in that, and that ended in there was $150,000 first place, and we ended up getting down to 2 people, and I knew the other person. And in that style contest, even if you wanted to play forward, even if I was playing a complete and utter imbecile, the format of the contest dictates you have to just make a deal, unless it's the final week of the contest, because there's no way to hedge, there's no way to protect. You'd be essentially saying, I want to bet $150,000 on a game. Anything can happen over the course of one game, so it would just be foolish. So yeah, that's the only good news I had this season.
So you took down $75,000 for the folks listening.
Right.
Did you go manila envelope? Did you go brown paper bag? Just put it in the pocket? What was the collection process like?
Well, the collection process is I had a partner on my end also, and we ended up splitting with another guy who also had a partner. So it was kind of amusing how it worked out. But in that style contest, you have no choice They won't put people together. I think Circa doesn't put people together either. If you want to work deals with people, you got to handle that on your own. And so there has to be trust. And the only way to do it is to turn in the same game until you lose or the season ends.
I believe Mike said on VSiN that if all of the parties that are remaining request there to be a deal made, then at that point something may be facilitated. But don't quote me on that. But I think there was it always gets interesting in these last couple of weeks. And we'll get to the Survivor in a second, but congratulations on yet another contest win. A nice chunk of change to take home for a season that, admittedly, I would say describing it as up and down is probably a fair way to do it.
Yeah, you know what? And this kind of segues into probably the most important advice I can offer the people in Circa. And probably the reason why I did win this is if you're not in that top 8, or if you're not really, and if you're not in the top 20, have a talk with yourself and come to grips. You're not going to be winning big, life-changing money. Okay. The sooner you realize that, the sooner you can go back to an attitude of not thinking about the money and not being distracted by, oh, well, if I do this, this is going to happen. Forget it. You're not going to win. If you're not in the top 8, you're not going to win it. And
right.
if you're and it's going to be very hard for you to get into life-changing money if you're outside the top 20, if you're outside the top 18 or somewhere along there. I forget. I looked at it and I told my buddy at 21, I go, you're not getting into life-changing money unless you sweep the board, which you can't count on that.
Never.
So,
yep.
So to finish my point, just have fun. That's how I won the last contest. I was down to one entry in that NFL contest, and I didn't care. I counted it as a loser. I literally used no time on it until like the last 2 or 3 weeks, because I just looked at it, decided what game to use. I was done. Literally, it was a 5-minute deal. And that's what I suggest everybody in Circa do. Hey, don't think about the money. You're not going to get yourself into life-changing money unless you're really right there near the top. And there's just a herd of people. Pay attention to some contest strategy. Don't take the COVID games. If the difference is between a game that's lined on an even number and an odd number, take the one with the odd number and have fun with it and relax and just hope that you win.
Last question before we get into the games. You talked about the herd. Everybody right now is at 49 points, 15 bets remaining, 15 points at stake. Give me an over-under for points required to finish in the top 50.
I think 57 is possible. 58 is I think, was it 58? I think 58 is possible.
58 gets you top 50?
I think 58 is possible.
Okay. Interesting. I was going to go a little bit higher. I was going to be right around like the 60 mark, thinking you probably need 11-4 down the stretch with this many people bunched up.
Yeah, but I'm just saying if 58 is possible, 59, I think can make it, and 60 should make it.
I feel like 59 would be a bit of a bad beat if you finish 10-5 and you're right on this cutoff, and that doesn't even get you in the money when you need to pick up just a point.
You got to remember there's a slew of people a half a game or a game behind you that can catch fire. So
right. Yep.
That's my second entry last year. I think I had 3 5-0 weeks to finish. I mean, I had given up hope of even getting in the money on that one, and it ended up in 5th. Lightning can strike, and you can bunch up a bunch of 5-0s, but you've got to watch people that are directly behind you. They can pass you very easily. You can have a 4-1 and you lose ground, or you push a game and you lose ground.
And this is not a shot at the contest or anything. Like, we all love this, and that's why we do the show, and we love everyone that works there behind the scenes too. But like you mentioned, you finished 5th. You finished 15-0, and I'm looking at the check behind you, and it was a share of $33,000. And it's just like, to me, it's like that should be rewarded at such a higher number. But like, I'm sure from your betting side, when the majority of those bets that you played down the stretch, you're probably making more from betting than you were the contest.
Yeah, well, I was very lucky. I mean, my contest record was lower than my actual betting record on sides last year, if you can believe it. So I was actually inept at the contest last year using the old lines, because I think I did 67%, and my betting on sides was 69% last year, and this year it's down the tubes. I mean, I'm over 500, but not profitable. So.
I can relate. I'm in the exact same scenario so far. So yeah, interesting talk. That was good to get that out there. I think, and go back and forth. And I think a lot of people watching that are still competitive in the contest can relate. We'll try work through week 16 quickly here. I think this will be the least sort of thorough breakdown we've given so far this season of trying to pick the top 5 consensus, because anything that we say right now, it's probably going to be outdated by the time we get to like 6 or 7 p.m. tonight. And so, as difficult as this has been the entire season, I would say at this point, this week has been like we don't know what's going to happen between now and Saturday. And I think last week, the Chargers Chiefs game had 300 combined picks on it. And Thursday night games are always low, but that was the lowest we've seen of any Thursday night game the entire season. Everyone's just waiting till Saturday to get their bets in. I mean, this to me is brutal. What I will say is there's probably a couple of games where the news is so one-sided and so overwhelming that we're probably going to see some picks pile up. And the first one, I don't know if you agree with it, but to me, I think Miami certainly stands out now at a pick 'em, because the Saints have ruled out both Simeon and Hill from starting, which means we're going to see Ian Book make his first ever start against the Dolphins defense that has really come on the second half of the season. We've seen them give elite quarterbacks in the NFL fits, and now you're getting a rookie starting in a game with such a short total. Like I feel like everyone's looking here towards Miami at some point, just playing off of the COVID news. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think Flores has already faced this quarterback in a bowl game, if I read that correctly. So he's already familiar with this guy. So that's a little less surprise for the Miami team.
So are we in agreement that we're probably going to see Miami find their way into the top 5 just based on the news?
From
what we know now, anyway.
It's a probable.
The other one that I was just going to throw out there has to be the Green Bay Packers, especially with this at a 7. I think that's very one-sided, with the Browns still dealing with all sorts of issues on both sides of the football. What do you think about Green Bay at 7?
Yeah, I mean, this should have been line 7.5. It really should have been. It would have made the choice. There are a lot of 7.5s out there, and it would have made for more interesting contest play. But yeah, it makes Green Bay very inviting.
Anything else to you from just beyond like the COVID situation and what comes with it? Like the 49ers and Titans, no COVID, but it's a Thursday game in a week where there's so much uncertainty. There's no way that's coming anywhere close to a top 5. It's like we're crossing that out. The Jags and Jets. The Jets have a COVID list, 18 players as recently, but no one's betting the Jags at this point. So I don't think that's going to find its way in. The Colts line is flipped, which I think is interesting. That's probably foreshadowing of where this number is ultimately going to go. It has within the market. But like other than that, we're looking at a full Sunday slate where there's some level of COVID impact in every single game. Does anything stand out to you here from anything that could be a top 5?
You know, the problem is what's the news that comes, because
exactly
we know that the Chiefs will be an easy top 5 if Kelsey and Hill are able to play, and the Steelers are going to be a top 5 if all the people on the current list are out. So
that game will either be 3, 3.5, or 10.
Right. So you know that's a top 5 game right there.
Yep. Broncos will be without Teddy Bridgewater. The Raiders off of a win that was rather uninspiring against the Browns, but that one at a pick 'em, one of 3 games at a pick. Is there anything there playing off of the Bridgewater injury?
You know what though? I think I think that's going to get equal play pretty much.
Cincinnati, Baltimore, with all of the issues Baltimore has on defense. Anything
Well,
there?
yeah, they're having a
Mixon comes
closed
back
practice
consistent.
today. They won't even show the press what's going on. So there's the unknown factor that makes people even more paranoid. If Jackson doesn't play, the line's going to be one thing, and if Jackson and these other guys are able to play, then the line will come crashing down. So that's another top 5 candidate.
Jackson plays, that number probably moves towards pick. If it's Huntley again, that downgrade's significant. I know that it looked different against the Packers, but I mean, that's going to push towards 5.5, 6. Is that too high?
Yeah, I think that's too high because I think this market is thinking. Yeah, I don't think it'll jump that high. I think it would only jump to like 4.5.
LA Chargers in Houston has bounced around the entire week. There was a COVID outbreak in LA. It seems like that's now not as extensive as it was made out to be initially. So that number's come back, but it got as low as 8. We're seeing 10.5 here for LA on the road against the Texans team that has issues of their own from a health perspective. What are you making of this big number?
I don't think it's a big number. I think people are going to be happy to lay the 10 if as long as everybody's going to be playing. I was surprised to see the line had bounced back up. I must have missed the news. As you referenced, things are getting better there, obviously.
The only player that's been ruled out has been Bosa. There was another defensive starter that was far less impactful, but it's basically Bosa's out, then they're still uncertain about Eckler. We'll see the extent of that a little bit later. But as well as anyone, when the market reacts to something before there's any news, the market's always right. It gets out somewhere else and it gets bet. And I think that's a case of what we've seen here. Is LA, even with some of the uncertainty, which from the market movement seems to be less impactful, a potential top 5 here?
Possibly. I mean, I think we're going to get 3 or 4 COVID games in the top 5 just based on whatever news is available. That's the problem. I think putting those COVID games aside, I think people are going to be passionate about the Bills Patriots and maybe the Colts Arizona.
So when we're looking at that Bills Pats game specifically, there's Kendrick Bourne for New England, who's on the COVID list, and then there's Cole Beasley, who we know is not vaccinated and won't play for the Bills. We get a rematch of a game that was very popular in the first meeting. What are we looking at here in a game where it seems like we know sort of what to expect, but we're also seeing a very different number from the first time these two teams played? Dead Money Media, who's been following the show all week, says Buffalo, New England could get 2K total picks, which I think puts both teams this week specifically inside the top 5. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, I think it's going to be popular both directions. I think there's lots of support on both sides on this one, don't you?
This number with the result and how that last game played out, I think is very divisive, because I believe people are looking at the Bills and saying they did not get a chance to throw the football, which they will have tonight, which is obviously the strength of their offense. And then on the other hand, I don't believe that people look at New England and say they can replicate that success they had, because they may not need to. Although I disagree with that. And the people betting New England are just going to look at that result and say, why can't they just do the same thing again on the ground? And now that New England has a threat to pass, that forces this Buffalo defense to be a little less one-sided in terms of how they defend it. So, to me, it's a very clear handicap for both sides. But I think the fact that we're 5.5 points off of where it closed just a couple of weeks ago is probably going to be enough for people to say, if you like Buffalo, it's well, this was 3 a couple of weeks ago. And if you like New England, you're pointing to what the spread was and pointing to how dominating that performance was. So I agree with that for sure.
Yeah, I think you have people on both sides laughing with confidence on their side. And it's going to be, an awesome game to watch. And I think it's a likely candidate to get both sides on them.
Anything else we're missing here before we try to piece together a top 5?
aside,
This is tough.
yeah, I mean, we just have to completely ignore potential COVID news and stick to games that are unaffected by it. But maybe the Colts might sneak in there.
So let me try take a stab here at a top 5. See what you think about this. Indy -1, LA -10.5, Miami pick, and then both Buffalo and New England. With the caveat being the most clear game that is going to completely blow up this top 5 is Pittsburgh, Kansas City, because we're almost ensured that one way or another, depending on how the news breaks for KC the next 2 days, that either the Steelers or Chiefs are going to find the top 5. But as we're doing it now, Indy, LA, Miami, Buffalo, New England.
And that's this is a good point to point out that contest players have a very serious decision to make when 3 or 4 of these games get out of line to market before the deadline. Are you going to be one of those people that go with the herd? Or are you going to be one that goes against the herd? Or are you going to be one that just avoids the game entirely? So that's going to be very important to decide, because it's just it's too tempting to leave for some people to leave a game that's -7, that's 10.5 everywhere off the board, or a game that's +1 the other way and it's 3 on the contest card. What are you going to do with it?
It's tough,
because you know what everybody else is going to do with it, or at least most people.
Most people are going to play it and take the value, thinking they made a good pick. But how good is it if there's 1,500 people on it?
And if you're at the very, very top, then you already know what the people around you are going to pick. So, factor that in accordingly, because you're looking at what they're doing every week.
So in terms of the stab at the top 5, Dead Money Media, again, you're also going to get TV games picked by those out of the money looking to pick games they will watch. My only, it's an interesting comment. My only point back is if you're worried about what the people that are not out of it just picking on watching, then that kind of skews your strategy as well.
Absolutely. There's a lot of moving parts here, and unfortunately, you got to find a way to have fun with it. You got to have a way to have fun with it, and come to that realization you're probably not in the life-changing mode range, but yet you do want to make it in the money. So how are you going to do it? How aggressive are you going to play it? So if you want to be aggressive, then you're not playing the COVID games. You're just playing different games, and you hope the COVID games lose. Or you're going the other side, which I don't necessarily advise that. And you're avoiding even numbers, you're gravitating toward odd numbers, and you're just doing every little tiny detail of just game selection. So, and it's not as hard as you think it is. You make a list of all the games or all the sides you can live with, and just go right down the list of, okay, this doesn't fit this category, I can use that. This doesn't fit, I got to avoid that game for this reason. And it could literally be a 2-minute process.
Just got to whittle it down and go with it.
Yeah.
Let's wrap up the top 5 here. Are you okay with those 5 I suggested? Miami, New England, Buffalo, Indy, LA, with the caveat that KC, Pittsburgh is going to be in there one way or another, depending on news.
Yeah, why not?
Who's your top selection? And you can ice it this week. You're 3 up with 3 to play. Who's your top?
I'm going to go with Indy.
Okay, and that's just a wave of public support for Indy we've seen all week. I am entirely stuck on how this is ultimately going to play out, but I think I'll go Chargers. New England, Buffalo is going to be really split, but I think the Chargers might break through, and that number might keep climbing up if everyone's healthy. We could ice it. Steak dinner. It's in your grasp. I don't know how
I'm
the
getting
split
hungry.
works, but I hope we don't get to it. Survivor this week, very interesting. And we're not going to break down all the possibilities, but we are going to point out one thing that really could potentially shake things up because it is the Christmas week, so you get a forced pick on the Thursday and Saturday games. And we talked last week and sort of teased how interesting this was ultimately going to be. But we're seeing a situation where Green Bay is obviously the overwhelming favorite of these three games. The 49ers are a soft 3, Green Bay 7.5, and then Indy, Arizona is a pick'em game. And so there's going to naturally be people gravitating towards the Packers who've likely saved Green Bay to this point. When you start looking at the availability matrix, 8 people have Green Bay available. Now, when you start sort of comparing and going down the list, you'll quickly see how many people that have Green Bay available do not have Arizona available. And when you start to look at how many people that have Green Bay available also have Tennessee but not San Francisco, you get into a spot where more than half of the pool remaining may have may have Green Bay, but they don't have another way in which they can go to swerve it. Nobody has Indy left, so that's checked off. So we're really at a spot here where it's the only question within this pool is, are you taking Green Bay or not? And if you're not, you're kind of forced to go with Tennessee for those people that do still have it remaining. So let's put you in the position of one of the folks that has Green Bay available, but also has Tennessee. Do you go with the Packers to get through and then fight your way through the Sunday card? Or do you try swerve and, as you say, play to win and go with the Titans potentially pulling the upset later tonight?
For this, for me personally, I wouldn't. I'd have my kick my feet up and relax and not overthink it and try to get cute with too much strategy. You got to use the Green Bay. That's why you saved them for this week.
All right.
You got to get by the short week. You got to do whatever it takes to get through Thanksgiving and Christmas week.
So the short weeks is just survive and get through. And then on Sunday, you get to an interesting spot where we're looking at the board and we're not going to break down the full availability because it gets very complicated, but it's a spot where a lot of the teams that are favored by big numbers were popular choices at other times during the season. The one exception would be the LA Chargers, where there's 9 people with the Chargers available. They're the big favorite against the Houston Texans. So a lot of the people that could potentially get through when you start to look down the matrix, those Green Bay Packers available selections that can be made, a lot of them also have the LA Chargers available. So I think it's not a stretch to say we're going to see Green Bay as the most selected on the short week, and then the Chargers as the most selected on Sunday. Fair analysis of it?
No, yeah, I think you're to the point where you can only do so much, and you hope that the lottery aspect of it doesn't come back and bite you in the butt with these upsets. But that's the nature of this contest. You put yourself in a position to have certain teams at certain times of the year, and you roll the dice whether they show up or not.
16 entries remain going into week 16. Give me the over-under for entries remaining at the end of the season.
Oh, I'd have to look at the matrix more. I think
4.5 is my number.
Without looking at the matrix, it would just be silly of me to just go higher or lower. But it seems like
trying to leave the show and give something to talk about to people. But
I think it's going to be more than that. With how many people I saw that had Green Bay and the Chargers, I think it'll be more than that.
All righty. We'll leave it with that. I appreciate the willingness to stick to the analysis first before giving an opinion off the cuff. For LVC, I'm Adam Chernoff at Covers.com. This is the Football Betting Contest Countdown Show. If you've been following along with us all season, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and enjoy the festivities. Hopefully, by the time you get to submitting your picks on Saturday, there's a little more clarity to some of these games. It's going to be a messy week, but it's going to be a fun one to look back on next Thursday when we join you for Week 17 at the usual 10 a.m. Pacific time slot. Enjoy the break, guys.